didn't say she was.
That's here.
I
Here
never
it
remember
is.
to save it. Oh, you got it?
I have it, yeah. 415.
contactless.
Yeah. Oh, you got it? Okay.
Yeah,
That's been good.
Yeah.
huh? We're live.
So do you want me to?
Yeah, I think probably.
I'll
you should.
pretend. Okay, I'll do
Yeah.
the best I
Do
can.
you want to do it
Okay.
in the middle or just do it from there?
I can just do it from. Does that matter?
Okay.
I don't have to be in the middle. Right?
A little odd.
Okay, today is the September 18th Open Space and Ecology Committee. Roll call. Everyone's here. Oh, oops, yeah. No. Well, I was going to say except Michelle and Carl. We have a quorum. Adoption of the agenda. Is there anything else someone would like to add?
I don't know that it's an addition so much as you might notice that the Energy Coalition Program Manager, Ivana Doran, is not here in person. Her flight was delayed this afternoon, so she is on Zoom meeting. So she's listening to us live, and when we get to that part of the presentation, she'll be able to jump in.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about not being able to be there in person. I really wish I could.
Well, thank you. I think we're okay sticking with the agenda as is. I just wanted to make that note so you understood what that little thing on the bottom of your screen was. Is our Zoom meeting.
Okay, next, approval. Oh, I'm sorry.
Are we going to talk about the community festival in the subcommittee reports? Is that
Generally, that would be where we would do it.
all right?
Yeah, is your mic on?
No. Nope.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. All right, approval of the August minutes. Any comments, changes?
One minor one. It says in there that I asked if we could have a paper mache carbon footprint again, but it was not clarified that it was for the community festival.
Oh, okay. So can we make that change? Thank you.
I'd also sent some corrections to Adrian right before the meeting. Concerning, it says I said something I didn't say, so.
So I believe you were talking about the July minutes?
Yeah.
So we
Oh,
are talking about the August
Yes, you're right.
minutes?
No, wait, because that was July's meeting, so that would have been August's minutes, or that would have been July's minutes.
July's minutes,
Okay.
which would have been approved, which
Were already approved,
already approved.
without me. So, okay.
So if we need to make a correction, we would have to re-agendize that. If we can separately address the issue without re-agendizing it, the minutes, then we could go about it that way in the subcommittee. I will leave it up to you. I checked with Ingrid after I saw your message right before the meeting, and she said since those minutes were already approved, we would need to re-agendize next month the
Let me think
revised.
about that.
Okay, let me know what you'd like to do. I apologize for having missed that.
So other than the community festival clarification on the August minutes, everything else okay?
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, this is where I'm going to screw it up. All in favor of approving the August minutes?
Aye.
Yeah. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We're good. Next on our agenda, we have an update from Senior Planner Ken Johnson on REACH codes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Pleasure to be back with you tonight. This presentation is provided as an informational item for the committee and to get your feedback. I gave a similar presentation to the Planning Commission just last week, and then we'll plan to present ordinances to the City Council this fall. Essentially, this is regarding draft ordinances that are in preparation right now to adopt the new California Building Code, or CBC, along with a couple of local REACH codes. Those REACH codes are the key topic of my talk with you all tonight. REACH codes are essentially, as I'm sure you're aware, they're codes that reach beyond the state code with more stringent requirements. And actually, before I go further, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Adrian for all her efforts in this as well. This is really not just a planning effort, but across departments, and she's been key in interfacing with the county, Office of Sustainability, Peninsula Clean Energy, and Menlo Park. So much appreciated. So every 3 years, a new CBC is published by the state. Local adoption of these codes vests the authority for enforcement with the local jurisdiction, and that's required by state law. The current operative building code is the 2016 CBC, and that set of codes provides the regulations for constructions of all types statewide. The new 2019 CBC will become effective statewide on January 1st. And the 3-year update cycle is also a good time to look at REACH codes that might be implemented at the same time. And as I mentioned, these are in preparation now, so this is really just an overview of where we're headed with the REACH codes. By way of background, the state allows for REACH codes, of course, but adoption of these codes must be substantially equivalent or more stringent than the CBC. The local jurisdiction is required to make specific findings related to geology, climate, topographic conditions. If the REACH code involves energy requirements for buildings, jurisdictions need to file an application to the California Energy Commission, or CEC, to demonstrate that the local codes are cost effective and would actually save more energy than those required by the state. So after council would adopt a REACH code that affects energy for a building, we send that on to the CBC. They usually take about 60 days to actually take action, and just like council, their board will hear the report and take action on that. Yes, Glenn.
So since climate change is a global problem, how do we deal with that second bullet point that says the local jurisdiction has to make specific findings that such changes are necessary because of, as I read it, conditions that are particular to that location? Is that going to be a problem for us? Or
I don't see it as a problem, no.
Do we have anything to say about that, or
Did you have something?
do we have boilerplate language that?
There's some boilerplate language, and I think when they're talking about climatic conditions, in the as Ken will talk about, I think in the next was just getting to, we have to do the cost effectiveness study, and that study has to be covering your climate zone to be applicable. So I think that is particularly where that comes into play, is that we have to show cost effectiveness in our climate zone. The fact that climate change is a global phenomenon is it affects us here. So that is, I think, reasonably acceptable and covered.
So it's not going to hang us up, in other words?
No.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this second bullet is also kind of broader beyond just the energy. So, for instance, fire, we have fire REACH codes that have to do with, we have very steep topography here with the kind of wildland interface at the top of our development into the mountain, and so it's not too heavy a lift, and it is a heavy lift for Menlo Park, and I'll get into that, and that they did do the cost effectiveness study, and generally speaking, those run, I've heard, on the order of $40,000 or so to actually get done. They're very technical and involved, and so it's good to latch on to one of those studies where we can. So I'll touch more on that. So there we go. And in the previous cycles, the adoption cycles, we have a few codes, and I just mentioned fire. We have already a fire prevention code that's local to Brisbane, and fire department is actually looking at it currently. They'll probably have some updates as well. Water conservation and landscaping, recycling, green building, and we have the solar energy ordinance as well. And consistent with the city's climate action plan, the focus for REACH codes in this cycle are measures that would go beyond the state minimum requirements in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, or GHGs. And there are 2 ordinances that are being prepared to this end. Both would place additional requirements on new developments and would not address existing construction. One is an electric vehicle or EV charging infrastructure ordinance, and the other is for building electrification to get away from use of natural gas in buildings. For the EV charging ordinance, we've been working, as I mentioned, with the County Office of Sustainability as well as Peninsula Clean Energy. And so we'll utilize a model that they actually prepared, and that's been, we've been in conversation with them about that throughout, and so that was very helpful. For building electrification, the City of Menlo Park, as I mentioned, they have their REACH code, and that was just introduced last week, so it's hot off the press, if you will, and so we'll utilize that ordinance as a model for Brisbane. And so the following are a few key highlights on EV charging infrastructure code that's been drafted or in preparation. As I'm sure you're all aware, transportation is a primary source of GHG emissions, and in our area, EV ownership is on the rise compared to fossil fuel using vehicles. So that's a good trend. However, availability of EV charging infrastructure is a critical component to continuing that upward trend. It's also significantly more expensive to retrofit for charging infrastructure than to install it during the construction of a development site. As such, ensuring that new development has ample EV charging capability is one of the keys to continued EV adoption and reducing GHG emissions. So before I talk on the proposed requirements, I should note a few terms. EV capable means that electrical capacity is provided to the electrical panel. EV ready is a step further in completing that electrical circuit to the parking space. And EV vehicle charging station, or EVCS, is a functioning complete station with plug-in equipment. And then, so for new residential developments would have a requirement as shown here. New single-family homes would be required to have an EV-ready circuit to allow for easy installation of EV charger as needed. This would be a step further than the state's requirement of EV capable. For multifamily, the code would require one EV-ready space per unit and 50% of the required guest spaces to be complete with EVCS parking spaces. The state code would just require 10% of parking spaces to be EV capable. So it's quite a bit further there. That switch? No. For non-residential new development, the state would require that only 6% of the parking spaces be EV capable when 10 or more spaces are required for a new development. Brisbane's local ordinance would distinguish between high and low parking turnover uses. So for low turnover uses, and that would include such things as administrative office, where you have people staying there for the bulk of the day. It would require 50% of the parking spaces to be EV as outlined in the slide here. And I think you saw the staff report. So I won't get into all the details here, but you can see on the screen how that breaks down. Then for higher turnover uses, such as retail and restaurant uses, they would have a total of 25% of the parking spaces as EV, as outlined on the slide here. So for both new residential and non-residential development, the EV charging infrastructure requirements would be significantly more than the state's requirements. And so we feel this would pay dividends both for owners down the road as well as for the environment. Then on the REACH code for fossil fuels and buildings. Yes.
I was just going to ask, are there agreed definitions for high turnover and low turnover? Is there like a set of building uses that is identified already as high turnover and low turnover? Are we going to have a fight over that, or?
So we have, I just mentioned a couple here, but we have a longer list that we're going to actually embed into the ordinance to try to avoid that. But I think ultimately you may have uses that we're going to have uses that aren't defined, and that becomes a matter of a building official determination to say it's high or low, and of course the applicant can appeal that. So for new building electrification, as I mentioned, we're looking to use the City of Menlo Park's recently introduced REACH code. That's a prescriptive ordinance, which is more straightforward in its implementation over a building performance calculation method. That's the other method. So the prescription, if you will, is to eliminate almost all of the natural gas-using building systems in new construction in favor of electrically powered systems. This would include a combination, would be in combination with solar energy generation on the project. So new low-rise residential buildings as 3 stories or less would be required to be all electric, except there'd be an exception for cooking appliances and gas fireplaces. And so there would be, although there's an exception for cooking appliances, they would have to provide electric to that location as well. So the appliance, if a new owner came in and wanted to switch out an appliance, they could do so readily. It's a fairly modest cost for that. The bigger cost is really in installing that gas line. So the savings is really to go all electric, and we would hope that would happen more and more. For mid to high-rise residential, which we probably will not see in this code cycle in Brisbane, but want to cover it anyhow, and almost all non-residential buildings, it would be required to be all electric. An exception is for life science buildings. And in talking with Menlo Park, they indicated that there were some extenuating factors for why life sciences may still need gas, plus they had insufficient data. They indicated that there was insufficient data to actually study it, so they really couldn't include life sciences in their cost-effectiveness study. Also in the Menlo Park model, there are requirements for solar. Those look pretty similar to what we already have in Brisbane, but we're going to be looking at that and updating that as needed for consistency.
Could you explain, Ken, why they would need gas for space heating as opposed to electric? I don't understand why.
About that part too.
Do you want to?
So my understanding, and I could be wrong about this, is that some of the life sciences facilities have very strict requirements for the temperature controls, and there is some concern, I believe, partially related to the potential for electricity to be out, grid outages, public safety power shutoffs, that would dip beyond, not provide the high level of control that they would like. I do believe that it is something, and Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that the Menlo Park ordinance requires that they demonstrate in their application why they are required to get that exception. So it's not that they would just automatically be exempted. They would need to demonstrate why. Did you have that same understanding?
I'll have to check that. I don't recall that part, but we'll check that.
I think it's mostly for their labs.
Yeah.
They
Right.
use, yeah.
So
No, I don't think it's,
That makes sense. I think
yeah,
the wording is
I
just a
think
little
it's
bit
lab
ambiguous.
yeah, maybe we could mirror theirs and also make it a requirement of their permitting as well.
Right. as we get into the details of crafting this further, we'll make sure we have a handle on that, and if they're strict in that regard, we'll be strict as well. So,
Okay.
yeah. And that's it. And so in closing, we'll be finishing drafting this and be bringing it forward to council in the fall, probably November, but we don't have a date set at this time. We need to get it in before the effective date of the 2019 CBC. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Looks great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ken.
I just want to apologize for being late. Totally spaced it. Thought it was next week.
We were worried about you.
Next time, call it 20 after if I'm not here.
Happens to the best of us.
This month has gone so fast and
I-
it's been
yeah.
so busy, and it's just been crazy.
Good.
I don't know. Although I will say at the pancake breakfast, we served more pancakes, I think, than we ever have.
That's awesome.
It was amazing.
Good.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off with the building efficiency program. And as noted before, we do have Ivana on the Zoom. So we are actually going to split the slides so you don't have to hear either of us too much. And hopefully you'll be able to, hopefully technology will continue to cooperate with us. So you guys are all pretty familiar, and especially the CAP subcommittee that already heard this with the study session. This is all going to be very, very familiar. And we are getting near the finish line, I hope. So what I want to kind of get everybody up to speed on, background, technical concepts, stakeholder engagement. The bulk of it is obviously going to be the ordinance draft review, expected costs and impacts, next steps, and then questions. And feel free to interrupt me for questions as well. I don't think I need to spend too much time on the background with this group because you're all pretty well aware of our climate action plan and the need to address commercial buildings and the great grant that we received from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District that has really made this work possible over the last basically year. So it's been in the works for a while now. So I think actually this is where I'm going to let Ivana take over.
Perfect. Thank you, Adrienne. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Loud and clear. And just
All right.
let me know when you're ready for the slide to advance.
Okay, I will. So great, thank you. Yeah, like Adrienne said, my name is Ivana Doran. I'm with the Energy Coalition. We've been hired on as a consultant to the city in the building of this program, and I've had the opportunity to meet some of you through some of our outreach efforts for this effort, and I think many of you have also met my coworker Mark Costa, who's been working on this as well. But we'll start by taking a step back to how this effort really started with the market analysis here. We really wanted to get to know the lay of the land and understand what we're working with. We really needed to know, first of all, what the building stock in Brisbane really looked like, and so that's that's essentially what you're looking at right now, a summary of that. So the bar chart at the bottom of that slide is just showing you, that most of the building square footage in Brisbane is made up of first industrial buildings and then followed by commercial. And lastly there we have the residential multifamily component represented. And right above that we can see some of the largest building owners in the city. We needed to know that to understand who some of the biggest stakeholders were going to be. We see HCP up there, Prologis, Phase 3 Real Estate Partners sort of taking the lead in owning some of the largest buildings in town. Adrienne, you can advance to the next slide when we're ready. Okay. All right, so with this section, we'll take a step back and review some of the main components that were part of this program. But like Adrienne said, a lot of you have been participating along the way, and so you'll already be familiar, and I'll try to be brief about it. Let's go to the next one. Okay. We'll start with a focus on benchmarking, essentially comparing a building's energy and water use with itself over time and then with other similar buildings. And we recognize a lot of the benefits of this data that comes from benchmarking, and we also recognize that multiple stakeholders are benefiting from it. So it really helps open the eyes of building owners. It helps them make informed decisions and better manage their resource use and the expense associated with that, of course. For local governments, it's this data that they receive. They're able to make more informed decisions about where funding should be allocated, what programs should be launched, etc. And then finally, when benchmarking leads to better resource use, the thought here is that the market rewards performance and efficiency. Waste is never a good thing. And so that's sort of the cycle that we ideally would like to see. Thank you. All right, so by far the most common tool used for the act of benchmarking itself is this Energy Start Portfolio Manager tool. It's a free online tool provided by the Environmental Protection Agency. It's widely used in the U.S. and I think in Canada, maybe elsewhere as well. It's, it's sort of rare these days that anybody's using anything else. But this slide just sort of shows some impressive stats here. 25% of the total building market in the U.S. has already been using Energy Start Portfolio Manager to benchmark its buildings, representing over 185,000 buildings and over 21 billion in square feet in the U.S. alone. So, just to reiterate that it's very widely used. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so a little bit of an audit refresher. Building audits are essentially an evaluation of how energy and water technologies are functioning in a building. They consider lighting, HVAC, pumping, insulation, etc. So from these audits, we're provided a report with a list of measures that owners can adopt to reduce the resource use in their buildings. Whether by efficiency, solar, demand response, and the like. They're presented with a variety of different options. And audits come in all different levels, all different shapes and sizes, if you will, and they provide varying levels of details. So we're going to be highlighting two different ones here. The first one is asset score. And it's simpler. It's simpler to implement, more beneficial for smaller buildings. There's quality information still, but it's sort of less hassle of a full audit, which may be too costly and not identify enough savings potential for some of those smaller buildings. And then there's the ASHRAE Level 2 audit, which is really the standard sort of full-size, complete level audit that's recommended for some of the more medium and larger buildings. It's going to give you more detailed information and a lot of actionable measures that'll reduce resource use in a building. And I think with that, perfect. Thank you. So when we talk about retro-commissioning, we're talking essentially about simple fixes in a building. They can be relatively quickly and easily applied to produce resource savings. When technology is installed, sometimes it's done so incorrectly, or part of it is worn and just not operating properly, or it's not operating at least the way it was intended to. So this is where retro-commissioning comes in. I like to think of it as a retuning, for instance, recalibration to get back to optimum performance, what it was meant to be. So, those are only a few examples listed there. There are certainly a lot more. Let's go to the next one. Perfect, thank you. So Brisbane is actually in good company when it comes to the development of this type of program, especially in California. You can see there's a lot of activity going on there, and actually a lot of, local regional neighbors that are pursuing this. So we've got San Francisco, Berkeley, and San Jose. Los Angeles and San Diego have established their very own benchmarking programs, and actually the whole state of California has one. It's also very much a nationwide effort and even an international effort. Everybody sort of sees the value that benchmarking data can provide, and many of them are starting to take the next step and say, okay, well, it's not enough for you to have this data. Please look at it and consider what you can actually really do with it. So the hope being that, this data leads people to make better decisions, and that makes sense to a lot of people. All right. So stakeholder engagement's taken place at each milestone of this project. I know we've seen a lot of you at the 2 workshops that we hosted. We also hosted 2 webinars to explain some of the technical concepts. They were sort of primer webinars, make sure everybody understood what we were talking about before we got into the actual workshops themselves. We've got a great online presence through the city's dedicated website page, which hosts all the meeting materials, and we've opened up a couple surveys for feedback through that channel as well. There have been a lot of one-on-one meetings that have taken place with some of those biggest and most prominent building owners that I've discussed and that were in the first few slides. And then, as Adrian mentioned, we recently completed the 2x2 study session with the Economic Development Subcommittee and the OSEC CAP Subcommittee. So that's just a quick at-a-glance of the recent stakeholder efforts.
So I did just want to chime in here to note those one-on-one meetings. Karen and I sat down with folks from those businesses, and those 5 companies represent over 2 million square foot and over 30% of the buildings that will be covered by these ordinances.
Adrian, how did they, what was their reaction? Was there any feedback from that experience?
We did get some feedback from some of them. By and large, it was pretty positive. A lot of the bigger owners with buildings in other jurisdictions have already experienced these types of programs in other places. Some of them had comments along the lines of, we know we need to do this stuff and we know it's going to save us money. We just haven't gotten around to it, and this is going to give us the push. Some of them had comments along the lines of, I really don't think this is going to make sense for a building that's about to be demolished or that's not being occupied during the year. And so we built in some exemptions that we hadn't considered in response to some of those comments. So by and large, nothing that was too, seemed too concerning. It was just, hey, what are we going to have to do? When are we going to have to do it? And, seemed to be go over pretty well.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. All right, go ahead and move us along then.
Yeah, so let's get into the meat of it then, some of the components of the draft ordinance. And Adrian, I think we wanted to divvy up some of these slides, but I believe that I'm starting here. So, we'll hone in on some of the most critical parts of the ordinance here for discussion, the benchmarking and self-reporting, beyond benchmarking, as we've coined it, prescriptive path, performance path, schedule for compliance, penalties for violation, fees, and appeals. We can go to the next slide. Okay, and here are some of the key questions. Certainly some of them we came up with on our own, but others we've noticed that folks have asked along the way through stakeholder outreach. So, of course, everybody wants to know what buildings are going to be covered, who's going to be exempt. We've had a lot of feedback related to that. What is the performance path? What is the prescriptive path? Everybody wants to know what the average cost of an audit is going to be. Of course, people want to know what this will cost them. These are some things that are tricky to sort of pinpoint. We'll talk about what a range would look like a little bit later in the presentation. What are some of the retrofit options? What will people have to do at the end of the day? What is the schedule? When does this all start? Are there penalties or fees associated with it? And then what are the expected impacts out of all of this? Okay. So let's take a moment to talk about which buildings will be covered under the program. Some very careful planning actually went into this because we wanted to cover the most amount of square feet, but make sure we were being fair and reasonable to building owners. So this is a quick look at the options that we had before us. And we really found that with a threshold of 10,000 square feet for benchmarking, we would really be able to capture 69% of the square feet of buildings in town. So if we went further down, you can see to the right of that to 5,000 square feet, we'd only gain 1 more percentage point. And so, you know, the decision making there was that doesn't seem to be worth the burden to smaller building owners. With that 10,000, we've really captured the industrial, the commercial, and the residential multifamily. So that's just kind of some of the logic that went into the 10,000 threshold for benchmarking.
And I had a note in here to call out that condos are not covered buildings. It has to do with the state legislation and basically the way the state code is written. Condos are not considered covered building types. So.
They're not considered multifamily residential.
They're not considered. They are considered multifamily residential. They're not considered covered buildings in the state legislation. This was something I don't think we had really kind of realized exactly until relatively recently. So I don't know that we had discussed it. That was why I wanted to call it out. I think it has to do with the metering and ownership. Whereas in a multifamily building with one owner, you have one owner, and in the condo situation, you have different owners for various units and complicates things significantly. So they are not considered covered buildings.
I had really hoped.
Yes, that's exactly what it is, yeah.
I had really hoped that we would go down to the 5,000 square foot level, and I mentioned that several times in the surveys that we did. Can you give some examples of areas that fall beneath the 10,000 and above the 5,000, or 5,000 and above, examples of buildings? Because it seems to me like we might as well, we should go for as much as we can.
I don't have that information off the top of my head. I apparently missed that.
I'm sorry. I had a difficult time hearing the whole question or the whole feedback.
What I said was I attended the 2 meetings, and in both I said that I thought we should go down to the 5,000 square foot building level, because Brisbane does have a lot of smaller buildings, and some of those buildings are less efficient and could actually really benefit from this. And I know it statistically it's only another percentage point on your graph, but the reality is how many buildings are we talking about? And on the ground, I think it would make a difference for them to come up to the same, try to achieve some energy savings this way. So I do think that we should extend it down to the 5,000 square foot level for buildings in Brisbane. And I asked to see what examples of buildings are falling out because we're only going to the 10,000 square foot level. Do you have any examples of buildings that are in that group?
Would we have any multifamily buildings less than 5,000 square feet?
I was thinking more of commercial buildings like, buildings that are like maybe the Brisbane Village or Midtown Market or, what other commercial buildings we have in Brisbane that are smaller.
I don't know, Ivana, if you know anything at that detailed level.
Yeah.
Probably Mark would be able to come up with something off the top of his head, but he's on the
He
other
would,
side
yeah.
of the
So
world.
I can connect back with Mark, who's sort of been our technical analyst and helped to produce this slide. So the question is, what examples of buildings would fall between that 5K, 10K threshold, and sort of what's the opportunity lost there? Am I capturing that correctly?
Yes, because in Brisbane there are buildings that are in that group that I think would make a difference, and every little bit counts.
Yeah, no, that's certainly a fair point. There are definitely buildings below the 10K thresholds that are inefficient. Again, the logic was to really consider when we're talking about auditing and implementing measures and retrocommissioning, where we'd really see the most bang for the buck and provide the least burden to the small building owners would be that 10K threshold. But I mean, that's certainly a fair point, and I'll go back with Mark and we'll sort of dig into this 5 to 10K threshold and see what's in there.
Yeah, because I don't consider it necessarily a burden so much as an opportunity for them to actually save a great deal of money in the long run and have a better energy profile.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head who might fall into that. If we looked at, say, Midtown Market, we would
doubt that they do.
we would just be, well, they're under 10,000 square feet, I think.
Yeah, but
We would just be very disappointed if we saw their profile. I mean, they have air compressors all over the place. I mean, they're going to be burning energy, and there's nothing they can do about it.
They are putting in more efficient equipment.
Yeah, but they already are. Meaning, I'm trying to think of anything small that we would hit. Like Brisbane Hardware is smaller, but they really don't have anything but lights. The taqueria burns gas with reckless abandon because they have to. So I'm trying to think of anything small that we actually might make a difference in. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Well, that's why I asked the question: what falls in that group? What falls in that
Probably going to be
category?
pretty small.
I also want to just mention that, as you know, when we went over it, and also some of you guys attended these meetings, a lot of the other agencies that have gone below the 50,000 stopped at 20. So we kind of felt comfortable with the 10.
But they're
25.
huge cities. They're,
yeah,
we're a small city, and so
I think it's 25.
That'd be interesting.
And if we want to, if we actually decide the whole committee wants to recommend at some point going to a lower number, we're probably going to have to extend the process to do that because we've already met with council subcommittee and gotten them on board with this
number
program as it is. Yeah.
I mean, I think one thing I would want to point out is that there's nothing in here that suggests that a building not required to participate couldn't voluntarily participate. All of these things are things that can be done voluntarily and often are. They simply wouldn't be mandated. Yeah.
And we're trying to build a reasonably robust website of that. What are the rebates? What are the programs to finance? You know, what are the improvements you can make that's going to be a lot easier to use, so there still can be outreach to those smaller buildings about that kind of stuff.
So I have a question. How onerous is it to use the Energy Star Portfolio Manager? I'm sure it depends to some extent on the building, but do we have any ballpark idea of how much time it takes? Because one thing maybe we could do is just require everybody to report and exempt businesses under a certain size from doing anything. I, for one, would like to have more information about who's emitting how much, and that's how we could get it.
So early on when we started this process, I actually, before we brought in the consultants, before we got our grant, I'd actually stumbled across Energy Star Portfolio and started to put my home into it just for blanks and giggles. And it is actually fairly laborious.
Okay.
But it's, it's like the green building business application. There's a lot of like, oh my God, I have to go like dig up my energy bills for the last year.
I would chime in on that point that is actually not all that difficult anymore because PG&E now has a portal. It is a little bit of a time delay by what I understand, but you basically connect your portfolio manager account to your PG&E account, and
that's great.
That data is fed in.
Yeah, because that was like, this was a couple years ago when I tried to use it, and it was a little laborious.
Was that the most laborious part?
That was the most laborious part, as I remember.
So I wouldn't have any problem with requiring everybody to report.
I mean, most of the other stuff, like building footage, square foot, this data, that data, I was able to, a lot of it I was able to do off the top of my head. But I'm not sure that everybody is as informed about their space as I am. But
yeah, and it's also going to vary dependent upon what fields are actually populated in there. You know, in this draft ordinance, we have required fields for buildings 10,000 plus. But for example, in the state ordinance, they don't actually mandate, certain fields. So it's more laborious to do more of them, of course, than the bare minimum that you would need to benchmark.
Well, maybe not as part of this ordinance, because I understand that we're under a time pressure here. But I mean, after we do this, could we go back and kind of like go through the process ourselves as guinea pigs, pick out what is maybe not so onerous, and then work on adding like an addendum to this ordinance that would, ask people of those lower building sizes to put in things that are not quite so difficult.
Yeah.
I think that's probably an option. I don't hate the idea of having the benchmarking required and not some of the other requirements. I think those are things we could consider. That would, I do see the point about having that data is extremely valuable, and we don't have really other ways to get it. So I think that's something that we may be able to talk about, because the benchmarking, while it does take some time to do, is not really a big cost or burden. And I think that was really why we didn't want to go so low, is because some of the other requirements that we're going to get to in a minute are going to be a little bit more of a cost and take some time, and we didn't want to, impose heavy burdens on really small facilities and businesses that ultimately are going to be a small piece of the pie. So I think we can think about that.
Yeah. Right now, we don't really know how small a piece of the pie they are. I mean, some businesses
30% of the buildings
with small buildings are really antiquated and may use a lot and emit a lot. But I don't think we have any data at all, do we, on whether if we cover 69% of the square feet, we've got 69% of the emissions.
We do not know that.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that we don't have any way to know that at this point.
So if we benchmark the small buildings, we would know that, and that's why I think it's important. And that's why I brought it up from the very beginning, that I'd like it to be at 5,000.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really excellent point, because to getting to sustainability, I mean, last I looked, we're going to have to reduce our emissions by like 90%. And if we're doing 69% of the buildings and they're not reducing 100%, I mean, we're not going to get 90.
Well, I would note that I believe this 69% of the square footage is that the total square footage, 100% would include all of the single-family homes in town too, which are not covered under this, which is why you see even at the 0% or 0K, we still only get to 72%, because our entire square footage would include the single-family residence.
Yeah. So I mean, we may have to look at that eventually down the road. But
and we've talked about that as being something that, here's a place to start. We can do more down the road.
Absolutely.
So
I'm just sort of thinking out there in the future, like, what is it actually going to take to hit that net zero?
And look how long it took us to get to this point. So
I know.
we should take the biggest biggest step we can.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the steps that they have outlined will get the bulk of it. I mean, there's a huge difference in a 20,000 square foot building in terms of how it's heated, insulated, and built versus virtually
Mike.
5,000 square. Oh, sorry.
Oh, my.
No, it's on.
You were.
Yeah.
Talk closer.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, I was going to say I can't hear much
you guys are
else.
the only people that don't think I'm too loud. There's a huge difference in the way that industrial and commercial buildings that are, say, 20,000 square feet and over are built versus something 5,000 square feet and smaller. Bigger ones are often metal frame, no insulation. Smaller ones, wood frame, usually at least have some minimum amount of insulation. Bigger ones have these giant natural gas fire heaters that just blow air into a big space. Smaller ones around here probably aren't even heated. So it's just, there's a massive difference in the way that they're constructed, built, and operated, the electrical services and gas services that they have. That's probably why the threshold was set the way it is on the smaller buildings, even if you left everything on, they just couldn't possibly suck as much power.
Yeah. I mean, I think, unfortunately, I was sort of AWOL. I was in the middle of this process. I think I would have gone for 15 or 5. I would have either gone for the beginning or the kind of later half of the plateau, but I think I really do think that we should just drop this topic and stick with 10 for now because we don't really have the capacity to change this ordinance at this particular point.
I thought we had decided that we were going to have everybody at least fill out the
benchmark.
Yeah, but
I mean, if we want to do that and take it
this.
upon ourselves to do it, I think that's a great idea.
But not a.
Without it going.
I thought we were going to add it to
I don't think we
the
can do that as part of this ordinance.
All right.
Why not?
Yeah.
Wait,
so-
maybe I'm confused.
Let me note something though first.
Yeah, go ahead.
That until we get automatic water meter readers, everyone is going to have to do a manual process like Barbara had to do with her energy. And that might be still a couple of years out. So
10
that applies to everyone over 10,000, but it would apply to anyone that we add also.
Right, because you still have to walk by and
Okay. Thanks.
So I think probably what we'll do is we will look into whether we can still keep the process moving forward with the change to benchmarking threshold going down to 5,000. We probably will not change that for the auditing and other requirements. And if that looks like it's something that's going to kind of hold things up, we'll put that on the back burner for a later time. And maybe would be something we would do along with looking at residential buildings or something along those lines.
I'd really like us to make our best effort to do the benchmarking down to 5,000, and I know you will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on, Ivana, go ahead and pick things up here.
Great, thank you. We can auction off some more of Mark's benchmarking services. Okay. Great. So this graph definitely gets a little bit more crazy, but the summary here is that 40,000 square feet was determined by the similar logic from the last slide to be the ideal threshold for some of the beyond benchmarking requirements here, particularly the ASHRAE level 2 audits that are most beneficial for the medium to larger building sizes because again, they'll yield the most bang for the buck in terms of identifying energy savings that are going to be cost effective for the building owner to implement as well. That's really all I wanted to point out in this slide that has a lot going on to it. All right. So as mentioned earlier. Oh, no, wait. Adrian, I think this is where I pass it off to you.
Okay, I was just going to ask. So if you take out the flow chart here is basically a kind of snapshot of how buildings would move through this process. So we have let me see if this is going to work for me here. We have the annual benchmarking at the top here for 10,000 or perhaps now down to 5,000 square feet. That would start in 2021. So our deadline is probably going to be about May, and that would be looking at your 2020 calendar year data. And then we go into the beyond benchmarking, all of the other things that we are going to be asking building owners to do. And probably this is where those very small buildings would not be covered, I'm guessing. So we have two main pathways. We have our performance path at the top here. with water and energy, and I'll talk through what all of these acronyms mean. And then we have our prescriptive path. If you don't meet the performance options, you're going to go through this bottom path. So before I go into who goes through what path, we need to talk about who doesn't have to go through any of these paths. So the bullet points you see at the beginning are exemptions from benchmarking and from the beyond benchmarking. If you don't have a certificate of occupancy for the entire year, you're not going to benchmark. If you weren't occupied, you're not going to benchmark. If you didn't have energy or water services, or if you have a demolition permit issued or can reasonably document that demolition is coming in the near future, it doesn't really make sense for you to go through these steps. For beyond benchmarking, so you're still going to benchmark, but you're not going to do the audit and other steps. If your building is for sale, you have your real estate appraisal, you're going to submit the real estate appraisal to us to show that we're selling the building. Requirements are going to be passed off to the next building owner. And then if you have your certificate of occupancy within the last 5 years. So our brand new buildings, they're going to have to benchmark from the get-go. They're going to not have to do the beyond benchmarking requirements while they're a very new building. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to audit a brand new building that was just commissioned. They would fall in the next cycle.
I just had one quick question. Could a real estate appraisal be used as a way to circumvent the requirements?
Yeah, I was going to say, could we put it some sort of a, if it's been a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years.
And it hasn't gone on sale.
And they're not selling? Is there, yeah.
Because it seems to me like an appraisal is a pretty easy piece of paperwork to get.
$450, right, or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I've seen buildings for sale for like years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Years.
Now, if it's not being used, then it falls into the other category. So.
Yeah.
But if it is, then we're like.
I mean, I had a landlord a place in San Francisco that I lived at. There was a big Chinese sign on the front that said "for sale" with a whole bunch of, and because he was taking a perpetual tax deduction for this building that was perpetually for sale.
Companies, yeah.
Yeah, and on the demolition permit, will that have a time frame on that as well?
Yeah.
I believe a demolition permit, by definition, has a time frame.
Yeah.
Or can be reasonably documented. I mean, we should have a time frame on that so that, we're going to tear down this building in 5 years or 10 years. Then no, it should.
I don't think we have that in the ordinance, which means it's up to us to say, yes, we consider that reasonably documented and a near enough time frame that we're going to let you have a pass.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the real estate appraisal
Yeah,
of the
me too.
Dodge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, intended for sale within a year, but what if it doesn't sell? Are they just, kind of, yeah.
It's the same thing. Then it's up to us, and they have an
it
appeal
is?
process. If they don't.
So if it's like been 2 years, we can go, hey.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
I think it might be. I don't know if it's possible to go back and specifically spell that out in the ordinance at this point. I know we're getting really close, but
I'm not sure. I'd have to think through how exactly we
Would write that.
thinking is
write
good.
write that to say that if you're actually selling your building, then
Yeah.
you're good, and you can't just be faking it.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
And appraisals aren't cheap. I mean,
They're not that expensive either, especially when you consider that
in some cases you're talking about 100,000 square foot. I mean,
That's,
it's not as cheap as a house.
Yeah, but an ASHRAE audit is not that cheap either. So
No, they're definitely not.
I think this is something we need to think about. I know you guys will come up with something good.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, this is what it is.
Yeah,
It is.
kind of.
But again, if we have the ability to say yes or no, or urge them to.
The problem is
Every time we look at this, I see something a little bit different.
and the problem with the ability to look at it is
Yeah.
we don't have a good track record as a city for following through on these things.
It's difficult.
We just don't. We don't follow through on the variances that we give, the conditions of variances that we give on buildings, and all kinds of things like that. It's just more burden on staff, so it's better it's locked down at the beginning.
Well, I think in my mind the problem really comes from when we have the economic downturns and then we have staff reductions and just the kind of the things that can
Yeah,
that
we
have
also
to get
have
done.
a lot of exceptions.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily.
So I want to share some helpful information that Bob just Googled for us. You will seldom see a commercial appraisal for less than $2,000. $4,000 is probably the most common cost these days for commercial real estate loans of around $1 million. Some commercial real estate appraisals for very large projects can cost as much as $10,000 to $25,000. So we're talking.
Yeah, but the ASHRAE is what, 40,000?
No.
No, where did I see that?
It varies.
I don't know. We'll
an awful
get to
lot
that.
by what
So-
the building is used for.
Yeah, I think it is possible. I don't think it's a particularly.
There was a slide early on here that had the I thought there were prices associated with
It's later.
Square feet.
Oh, it's later, but I
Yeah.
mean the average cost that I've seen for a building 40 to 50,000 is like 6 or 7,000.
Okay.
For ASHRAE?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for an ASHRAE level 2, yeah.
Okay. I must have misread a table then, so I'll just drop that.
Yep. So, coming back to our pathways, we're going to talk next about the performance path. So, what kind of options do you have to prove that you have a high-performing building? If you have and I think this was something that was left off of the slides by accident for the study session. So we have LEED has an existing buildings operations and maintenance certification, or EBOM. So if you have that certification, that would be rigorous enough, if it's a current certification, that you would be able to get through on the performance path. If your Energy Star score is 80 or higher, which means you're better than 80% of buildings, weather normalized, all of that. If you have improved your Energy Star score by 20 points relative to your baseline year, if you some building types don't have Energy Star scores, so for those cases we have weather normalized site greenhouse gas intensities that are 25+% below the property type average. There are other databases where those things can be looked up, or if you have reduced it by 20+%, so giving some options to those who maybe have a building type not scored by Energy Star Portfolio Manager at this point. And then lastly, if you already have existing distributed energy resources, so solar photovoltaic panels, battery electric storage, a grid interactive efficient building, or a fully decarbonized building, show us proof that you have one of these things and you're good to go. You don't have to go through the other steps on the prescriptive path. If none of those performance path things apply to you, then your next step is to go and conduct an audit. So that's where we talked about the two different types of audits. The smaller buildings between 10 and just under 40,000 square feet would go through that asset score full, and then our bigger buildings, 40,000 plus square feet, would do the ASHRAE level 2 audit, which is the really industry standard, very rigorous building audit. Once you do your audit, by that kind of first compliance cycle, you're going to submit that audit report to us, and then you're going to have the 5 years of that compliance cycle to do either of the next two options. So that's either going to be retro commissioning, that's your building retuning, making sure your existing systems are performing as intended, or doing retrofits. You're going to have options of doing different things on a list. You're going to have to do at least one in the energy category and one in the water category. So what are those energy improvement options? This is a kind of current sample list. We are actually removing this content from the ordinance language itself so that we can keep this list up to date based on current practices without having to go back to council every time. So we have kind of the framework in the draft ordinance language, and we will have a separate document that would be posted online a certain minimum length of time before those compliance cycles that will say, here are the current options that you can do. You can see that some of them are more costly things. Some of them are simpler things like smart thermostats. We have building envelope measures on there. I think that was something that we hadn't listed out before, but we agree can save a good deal of energy. Participating in approved utility retrofit programs. And then if you have a measure that is identified by an audit or a retro commissioning report that is not on our list, you would be able to request that option. We want to make sure that any kind of really customized measures for certain buildings that we maybe didn't think of, but are identified by a qualified auditor, are something that they can move forward with.
So how do we make what's the process for follow through? So you have someone who's on the prescriptive path and they've got to make all these adjustments. So how do we know what's the follow through on that?
They submit in their next report what they've done.
Okay.
And the next report is 5 years later?
Yep, they have a 5-year cycle. And by that point in time, they need to have done their next steps.
And if they don't, are there penalties associated?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
So, other options on your list of things that you can do, we have energy efficiency, we have distributed energy resources improvement options, basically the same kind of things that you can do to be on the performance path, but we also added EV charging infrastructure here as a way to potentially incentivize existing buildings to add that. And then we have the water efficiency improvement measures as well. So one from the water category, one from the energy category. So the schedule basically is starting next year, and actually I forgot to update this slide. We may be looking at changing this date slightly. We learned that a lot of cities, including New York City, which obviously has an awful lot of buildings, have May 1st as their reporting deadline, and portfolio manager with lots of people using it may tend to get slowed down and frustrate folks. So we may change this. Most likely May 15th is what I am looking at. It looks like the only other city that currently has May 15th as their date is Boston, so I think we'd probably be a little safer than some of the other kind of common dates out there.
Question, is there any particular reason to stick to May?
Well, partially we need to consider that we're looking at calendar year data, so we want early in the year, but not too early that it doesn't give building owners time to comply. I wanted to avoid tax time to some extent. And then the CEC is going to have a deadline for us to report anything that we receive as a city to them. And my understanding currently is that that is August 1st. So we want to give ourselves some time to receive, maybe have some time for extensions, and be able to kind of put together all of the data, package it up, and send it off to the CEC by our deadline.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that, if people have questions, and sometimes people are just going to put it aside because they don't have time or they just don't get it.
Yep.
How do we help that group so that we can set ourselves up for success?
So I was going to talk about this more later, but we do have something in here, and this is another area where we are looking at slightly tweaking the language based on some comments we've recently heard from other cities. But we do have some exemptions or extensions for hardships. San Jose mentioned that, since this was their first year, they were reasonably generous in giving extensions to people who maybe just hadn't paid attention to the notices yet and found out very late in the game and gave them an extension. If they were in touch with a building owner and the building owner was working on it and aware, they were pretty generous. I think we would probably fall into that kind of situation as well. We want to work with building owners and help them to participate and comply and be successful, not, hit them with the stick right away. So I think we'd probably look at something like that. And then in our grant application, we had 2 phases. So phase 1, write the ordinance. Phase 2, implement the ordinance with a whole lot of training and resources and outreach. And so that's definitely something that next year or late this year starting to get the word out, making sure that people know, aren't surprised, provide them help in understanding how they can be prepared. And then you'll see on the schedule, we're going to start with our buildings first. So we're going to be actually benchmarking all of our buildings by spring of next year. And as we're building out the kind of the reporting framework, possibly having a early compliance pilot. So it'd be a voluntary thing where businesses who are ready or want to try it out and want to help us test out that reporting framework would be able to, go through it early, and we'd be able to make sure everything is working and tweak the process to make sure by the time we get to 2021 and the rest of the buildings have to comply, that everything is working as intended. So again, 2021, that's our benchmarking date. A couple of years later, we start to kick in the beyond benchmarking requirements, and then again, those go on 5-year cycles. So we have split up commercial buildings to start in 2023, and then industrial and the multifamily residential buildings a year later. That's partially to split up the workload on staff, and also industrial buildings and multifamily residential buildings may be a little bit more complicated, so they get the little bit of extra time.
Can they file a year early if they want to?
Sure. I don't think we would say they can't.
Okay.
I don't know that I'm expecting that to happen very often, but yeah, I think we'd allow that. Sure. And then we are hoping to avoid having people kind of falling in between those years. So really kind of, having the 2023, next time is 2028, and we end up on that cycle where we have a couple of years of going through compliance and then a couple of years where our staffing demands would be less. Penalties, fees, and appeals. So what we've done with this is refer back to other sections of our administrative code for penalties. So we do have some other provisions set forth in other chapters of our code that allow for administrative fees. I believe, did Randy say something? They could be up to $500 a day, I think is what that language says. I think that would be something that we would resist going to until we really got into a bad situation, but that language is there, and we didn't really want to set up a whole new process and policy, but just kind of stick with what the city's existing administrative penalties would be. And then as far as fees, we aren't currently setting any, but we do have language in there that would allow for fees to be set by a later council resolution. So if at some point in time we decided that the city needed to recoup the costs of staffing and running the program through filing fees, we would be able to do that by going to a council resolution. And currently our appeals language is simply to an appeal to the city manager within 15 days. Questions on any of that? All right. Ivana, I think I'm going to pass it back to you for this one.
Yes. All right. So we already touched on this one. Of course, one of the most common questions we're getting is, okay, what is this going to cost me? And as I mentioned earlier, this one's a little tricky to answer. There are a lot of different variables that go into it, and so there's a range. But essentially, we asked around, and from what we can say is, okay, for an asset score, which is, sort of an audit light, we can expect that the range will be anywhere from 600 to 2,000, depending on the size of the building and its different characteristics. So for the more detailed ASHRAE Level 2 audit for moderate, larger size buildings of 40,000 square feet, as I mentioned, we're looking at around 6,000. For bigger building, obviously more. I think we've got 100,000 there, and it can double in cost up to 15,000 and more. But the good news is here, with many measures that are uncovered through both of these efforts, a lot of them often have a very attractive return on investment, some even under a year, especially with those quick and easy fixes with retro commissioning. So Obviously we know that these pay for themselves eventually, some, more quickly than you'd anticipate. And I think that's all I wanted to say for this one, so we can go on to the next slide. And just a couple words on anticipated impacts. So there's a good little summary there of the buildings affected, and then we estimate that this program could help reduce about 2,700 metric tons of CO2 within 5 years of its start date. So lots of promise there.
And for kind of a reference point as to what that is in the scope of things, I looked back to our most recent emissions inventory. It would be about a 14 or 15% reduction from the sector, about a 4% reduction overall. And looking back to other measures in our CAP, the by far most impactful measure in our CAP at that point in time was a CCA, and that was expected to reduce about 1,400 metric tons of CO2 per year. So this is expected to be, on the order of almost twice that within that kind of 5 years of, getting all of those requirements rolled out.
Very impressive. Not zero, but very impressive.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yep.
So, let's just kind of run through next steps. We've talked about where we've been. We mentioned we had the study session a few weeks ago. We talked to Planning Commission last week. So Ken and I have been buddies on presentations, 2 meetings in a row talking about reach codes and this ordinance. And we are still hoping that we might be going to council on November 7th. We will see as we kind of get into these final tweaks and reviews if we're able to keep to that. But that has been my hope for a while, and I really hope we're gonna get there. So I think that is the end. Were there other questions that we?
I was just wondering, could you please send me just that cost page from this?
Sure. I can send.
The whole thing is whatever's easiest, and I'll just pull out that. Because I know for a lot of people it comes down to prices, money in, money out. I'm the opposite of that, but I understand that's the way the majority of the world works, and I kind of like to wrap my head around that a little bit better.
Yeah, for a small business, the $5,000 they spent on the audit may be 2 or 3 times what they would have spent just doing the work. Get double glazing and put some insurance or insulation up.
Yeah, but there's always the question of, do you know what to do? So,
Yeah, we'll start practicing.
Yeah.
With our own.
Or do you even know that you need to do something?
Yes, that might be the first question. I would like to ask that we take a 3-second break before our next agenda, or maybe 3-minute break before we take our next agenda item. And I really need to just get some water today.
Okay. Well,
1 minute, 2 minutes.
Like a 2-minute break?
Yeah.
Water break. Or potty break.
That's fine.
Do you want me to get you some water, or do you have a bottle?
I'm gonna go attach myself to the water fountain for a minute.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, move it. Or maybe go. We don't have a recess.
I need to have my brother's pants.
Okay, what's next? Here we are.
Life keeps marching on.
Good to go.
Okay. Subcommittee reports. We haven't done anything on open space. Climate action plan?
We've just been working on the benchmarking ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Events. This Saturday is coastal cleanup.
Yeah.
And so please meet out at the Sierra Point Yacht Club at 9:15, and you'll get shuttled to the site. It's going to be incredible. Last year we did over a dumpster's worth, almost a dumpster's worth, excuse me. It was amazing, the difference. So please show up for that. And then Day in the Park is October 5th, and we have some exciting things, and I missed that meeting too. So, Mary, catch us up on.
So we met, what was it, last week?
Mm-hmm.
And decided that we were going to do the flag arts and crafts event and have home intel and hopefully the solar panel that Ross will help us with, and talked about splitting up the day into 2 sections. So some of us will go and set up and then leave at around 12:30, and then we'll have some overlap, and then the next group would go in the afternoon from like 1 to 3. So I think Carl and I and Ross will be on the morning shift, and I think Adrian decided that you would be the overlap into the afternoon.
Yep.
And then we need a few more folks for.
I'm usually there all day.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you won't be there, Megan.
I'm at a wedding in Georgia.
Okay.
And I have double duty because I have Mountain
You're
Watch
at,
too.
yeah.
So, are we next to it? How are they setting up the booths? I forget.
We will be. I heard from Ricardo we should be in basically the same position as last year. It sounded like we definitely will be right next to Mountain Watch.
Okay, good. Because then we can cover each other.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing that we need clarification on is the piñata.
Yeah, so I followed up with Ricardo again this afternoon. He actually had just gotten out of a meeting, planning Day in the Park, and they had been discussing it. They have a band in the gazebo. He said it's a fairly big band this year, and with the booths now being on the lawn, he didn't really see a way to have to safely have a piñata and people swinging at it without that being.
Well, when we did it several years ago, the booths were on the lawn, as they are now. And there was a band. I don't remember if it was a big band or not. And we had hung the so the band was set up on the mountain side of the big gazebo so that it faced out into the majority of the park. And we had the piñata kind of set up on the back side of the gazebo. So it did work in the past. I don't know that that proves that it's not a problem this time, but it did work under the similar circumstances.
I wasn't there before, so I could not share, and I didn't know. Nobody who had been there before was at our meeting, so I shared what I could. I don't think Ricardo was there then, but that's what I've gotten from them in trying to ask multiple times. So if somebody else wants to try to take it up with them, you're welcome to do that. But if the Park and Rec staff running the event and planning the layout tells me there is no safe space to do that, I don't know what else I can tell them.
Yeah,
it's their event.
Let the piñata go this year, because the thing that is different, Barbara, is this. The booths circle the back side of the gazebo now, whereas before they were out in the squares on the lawn.
Okay.
So, yeah, it might not be safe. So, okay, education and outreach.
So I think we were hoping that we would maybe be able to get a couple extra volunteers for the day. I don't know. It sounds like we've kind of. Glenn, are you able to help out at all in the afternoon?
It's like a little
Maybe for an hour or so.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess our other question was if we are restricted to just OSEC members, or if
No, anybody
other
can help.
we can have other folks. So if there are other people that you think would be helpful community volunteers to help in the booth, I think our hope was to not have to have people be sitting in the booth for 6 hours. It does get to be a very long day to be there for the whole day. So
Sure
we'd
does.
love to have a couple of shifts if possible. So if the committee members could ask around for folks that would be good representatives of the OSEC mission.
Also, I have a question. Were you going to do, and I missed a couple of the meetings, but I did listen to some of it. Were you going to do like a board and have for the garbage cans so that people would physically see it? Like those
Yeah,
Tetra Paks, which still are not supposed to be recycled, and people keep throwing them in as if they are. Like have it up there, like a
We
huge one in
talked
your
about
face.
doing that, and I had said I would volunteer for that, but that all kind of fell apart since I wasn't actually on the event committee. I think was maybe part of the problem. And
So-
I don't know that I have time to pull it together at this point.
So we had talked last meeting about whether Scavenger would consider having a booth, and I talked with Teresa.
Oh, did they?
And unfortunately, they do not, because both Teresa and their other outreach staff person have weddings and major commitments that prevent them from being here. So they did offer for us to have, they have a sorting game with the mini bins and the little like cards for people to sort items. And we discussed that at the subcommittee, but in a 10 by 10 booth where we already have lots of other things going on, we felt like we were maybe a little bit pressed for space.
We only have 3 tables, so 2 tables are dedicated to the
That's
flags.
fine. I just wasn't sure.
Yeah.
So I did encourage Teresa to, hey, it's always the first Saturday of October. Hopefully you guys can reconsider having a booth next year. And if they can't, we can reconsider, borrowing their materials to do the sorting game at our own.
I mean, I was like literally going board, nail, or staple. Put them up so it's like so obnoxious in your face. It takes me out. I mean, I do food trucks, and the food trucks that I work with, they're like, oh, yeah, I put all the things out, and nobody puts the stuff in the right place. And I'm like, if it's in your face, and they still not do it? I don't know.
Yeah, no, they still can't.
You know what I mean? I want to create one for the food trucks and have, here, I'm going to make this for you, so that every food truck in San Francisco, at least all the ones I manage.
Well, we actually, at the last pancake breakfast, taped samples onto the lids of the bins.
It makes it so much, they're like, oh, they don't
I think your audience at the
here's
pancake
what I have in my
breakfast is
hand.
probably a bit more
I know. Sorry. Anyway.
savvy about where.
Thank you.
No.
No.
No,
No,
really.
we served 300 people, believe me.
I'm going to try and
they,
figure out
they did follow the, where we taped the cups.
because you don't have to think. People are like, what is this? What kind is this? They don't go there. They just drop.
Yeah.
Well, we're not.
It's in their face, but I'm just saying for any kind of event.
Yeah.
Bring some duct tape and go around that way.
We've also talked about over and over about having garbage can minders, so like they do at the Green Festival. There's
We're already
sitting
pressed
there.
for volunteers to
Yeah.
staff our booth,
Okay.
but
Able to
if
have
we
that.
have
Maybe we
folks
could
who
get-
really want to do that, I think we could talk with the Park and Rec folks about doing that. I'm
I
not.
still say
I'm not
in your
opposed.
face.
We could
Big
maybe get
picture
some of the
next
teens
time.
to do it. I mean, we were going to try and have like somebody from the Youth Advisory Committee join us. I don't know what happened with that.
All right.
That's gone under the water bridge, drowned down a.
Well, then I
Next.
guess we need some education and outreach.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think so.
So how's that going?
I like the fact when I heard that the new intern was going to do the library shelf and kind of bring it up.
Yeah, it's
to
done.
young.
You know,
Yeah.
I haven't been in.
Yeah.
Is it nice?
It's been.
I saw a picture.
I got to go. Okay, good. I thought that was awesome.
Okay. Dark skies ordinance.
We have not met yet.
Haven't done anything.
Okay. Festival tree replacement.
I did listen to that again, and I was like, really? But I understand the cost, and I see. Go ahead. Now you can.
I don't know what you're talking about, but the biggest takeaway was that a tree that's moved has only a 50%
50% chance, and it's
surviving.
90% chance. Yeah.
So since last month,
But I thought it depended on the size of the tree that we moved.
Said it's 90% chance that it'll live. if it's a baby sapling there or whatever.
From a box.
Yeah.
The smaller they
Box
are, the
tree.
easier they can acclimate.
Yeah.
But I thought the point was that we could
Well, let me
get...
just make my...
Okay.
Yeah,
sure.
let's just go on with
So at this point, Davy Tree has found a 20-foot tree. So the cost to move the tree that you guys found, that's about 14 feet. You had the slide, right?
Oh, yeah.
I was prepping a slide because at first they'd found an 8-foot tree, but now they found one that's
Cute.
20.
Whoa.
So the cost to move your tree is about 10,000, and the cost to plant this 20-foot tree is 9,500.
Okay.
About the same, but what I didn't get clear response from them about was the species is Sequoia dendron, and I'm not sure,
I think that might be right, actually.
but I'm not sure if they're fast growing. Are we, like, that's a mature tree that's taken a long
Wait,
time?
Sequoia dendron?
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah,
incredibly
Sequoia
fast
dendron
growing.
gigantea. That's the not the coastal redwood. That's the redwood that is in the mountains, and I don't think it will grow fast here. It's
Yeah.
not what we have around the library is Sequoia sempervirens.
Right.
They grow really fast here
Right.
because this is their native habitat, and they, well, not Brisbane, but they grow fast here. But the Sequoia dendron gigantea does not grow as fast here. It doesn't grow very fast there either.
Okay. I wanted to confirm that because I don't think any of us want a tree that's going to be 100 feet tall. And
Oh, it'll eventually get there.
Years.
It's just going to take a while.
Not in your lifetime.
Not like I said, it'll take a while. They don't. There's a little too much water around here for them to be super happy.
Yeah.
So
And so they do okay, but they're not. I don't think it's going to be a fast grower. That's what this. That's
this is a
what,
mature tree. This has been here a long time. It hasn't
Yeah, and it's 20 feet tall.
sprouted up.
So where are they gonna? Did they figure out where they want to put it?
No, so they is us.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So now, with the cost being the same, obviously we would pick a box tree that has a better chance
Yeah.
of survival.
Absolutely.
So the next thing would be to go and scope out and see what the
Locate.
costs are to actually plant it.
Well, the other thing is if Dave's going to talk to and help us, I mean, do we need input from him about the best location?
Davy tree?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but it might be just about the conditions that they plant it, not necessarily the where, because if we put it in a lawn area, of course we need to modify the irrigation so it's not getting watered like turf. Some of that stuff is obvious. But I think for where it fits in the park and where it makes sense visually, we should decide that and then get their input on how to plant it.
Okay, so maybe we could meet, all of us meet there on Day in the Park,
Great.
and
I'm
just
down.
Or maybe even sooner when there's not a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
all over.
well sooner.
Wanna do it
Day in the
sooner.
Park is only 2 weeks away.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be there. That's why I was asking if
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Stuff on a Saturday.
you want to meet. So who is the subcommittee? Mary Rawson?
I'm not.
And me.
No.
Yep.
Oh, Meg.
Yep.
Meg.
So what's your guys' availability?
What's yours? Let's start there.
I mean, anytime during the
work
week with
hours.
advance notice, I think is fine.
After
Right.
5?
You need it to be after 5?
I do.
Okay.
Okay.
How about next Wednesday?
Works for me, the
Okay.
25th.
You have conflicts on Wednesday?
Tap dancing at 6 o'clock, so it has to be before that.
Well, why don't we just meet at 5? We'll just walk down the hill and.
Okay.
Can we do
Okay.
5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Send me a text at 4.
Okay.
Because I kind of have an idea where I think it would be good. Can you bring a 20-foot? Never mind.
A story pole?
So is the goal to try and get a planet this year?
I mean,
Yes,
it's a good time
finally,
to plant.
please.
Fall is a good time to plant.
Mary, the goal is to get it planted
Plant.
5 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
I was going to say, do not beat
All right, let's move on.
5.
ECA grant application. What happened?
I submitted the application. Now I haven't heard anything.
Thank
And
you, Karen.
It was
Good
a little
job.
rough. I had that week to do it, so I told Adrian a few of the details that I just. When we looked at the cost, it seemed like we hadn't originally put enough money in, so I said, well, we kind of would need more money, or we could shorten the scope. I don't know if I can do that, but that's what I'm doing, and it was tough to do in a week. So, but I haven't heard anything yet
Okay.
back.
So I really appreciate your effort on that. I'm sorry that it's after waiting and waiting, it snuck upon us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Real quick question to go back for the tree festival. Do we need to do that with Parks and Rec too?
We will, but I think we can do a first
Okay.
review, and then we might be able to just say, here's what we came up with. Do you want to meet or do you like it?
Okay.
So no one is proposing taking out the old tree, or at least not seriously.
Not for a while.
I mean, I was, because if we put it in the same spot,
If it was
Freeze
chosen
the
to put in the
lights
same
on that.
spot, then we don't have to.
because it has the uplights.
Well, this
How-
one is 20 feet's big enough to hang Christmas lights off of, so we could.
How tall is the existing cypress?
Depends
About
which
30.
corner, it
Probably
depends which
30.
angle you're looking at.
Yeah, it's
It's
probably
probably
somewhere
pretty
around 30.
close.
It's not really that big because it's not
No.
Not
happy
happy.
where.
Yeah.
Well, it's just,
20's going to be fine.
they're not designed to be solitary. They're not solitary trees, so
Yeah.
the poor things just
We'll
went
take
Poor
Michelle's
thing.
picture next to
Lonely.
it, because now we've sized
Yeah.
it.
This tree is 4 Michelle's tall. Now the unit.
I just think that removing the old tree would be traumatic for people. So I'd rather have them get to love the new tree before the old tree comes out.
Okay, we'll give them a year.
Yeah,
Everyone?
a year, maybe 2.
Maybe.
Well,
We
Let's
could burn
go
it down for Christmas. That would definitely light it up.
This is not Burning Man, Ron.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Moving right along.
Can we erase that, please?
Speaking of trees, liaison for the tree ordinance.
I pulled a oopsie and happened to be one of the few times I did not look at the city council agenda on September, and I don't think anybody sent out a thing saying, hey, Barbara, stupid, go to city council tonight. Although, it's really my responsibility.
We're supposed to do that.
So I did not go. So you're going to have to update me on where it is.
If anybody.
We should have asked Ken when he was here.
Yeah.
No news is good news.
My understanding was that it passed and there were very few changes from what they had previously discussed. So I
watched it, and that was kind of my understanding too.
Yeah, I'm extremely disappointed. They did not adopt our recommendations.
Yeah, they didn't.
And I think that was because they also had recommendations from others that were pulling in the opposite direction. So
I suppose.
My understanding was that they felt like when all was said and done, it was a middle ground.
Yeah.
Basically to keep it roughly where it was. That was kind of the sense that I got, although I was not at the meeting.
Yeah, I think that the language that Ken came up with was extremely beyond excellent for the things that it addressed. But I think in asking to look at this, OSEC had felt that there were some other things that needed to be kind of incorporated, and most of those things did not make it in.
Disappointment.
So it was, I think, a very big disappointment for us, or for me.
Okay, benchmarking, I think we've already
Yes, you did the tree ordinance.
talked enough about that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And beautification, volunteer needed. There's one council member, Karen Cunningham, who is on the beautification committee.
I'll go.
Yep.
I'll get on.
Yeah, she already
I'm happy
snagged.
to.
I ran into her at the street party,
Yeah.
and she snagged me for that and said she was going to go grab a few other people. So I'm not sure what else is
Well,
happening.
there is a formal process, and the committee
Yeah.
has to
Yeah.
choose.
She can't do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. She was the city council person, so I didn't argue with her. I
Right.
just said okay.
No,
I'm not sure
decided-
what the process is.
They decided what the committee would, what members would, what it would be comprised of, and I believe it was a Park and Rec Commission member, an OSEC member, and one council member, which is her.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Ross, but you can raise your hand.
Well, I was going to raise mine.
I'm
And
not-
Meg is raising.
I'm not wedded
it's-
to the idea. I'm just saying that I ran into her, and that's what she
Yeah.
So it's,
Oh,
ad,
something on that,
it's
so.
ad hoc. It's for downtown and the park, kind of, I think, focused.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome.
And
So-
they would like OSEC to have one member be on that ad hoc committee.
I'm sort of looking at the amount of the distribution here of the committees, and Meg, you are short.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm
if she's
telling you.
short,
I
why
am
don't
It would
we-
be-
why don't we put her on that?
Okay. So
I was feeling like I was short. I mean, I'm tall.
I get it. So do we have a nomination?
You measure
then?
up in every way.
Do we vote, or just do it?
I think we vote.
Yeah, I mean, is Ross still? You want to be in the running?
I don't care. I mean, I'm all over the place over here already, and Megan isn't. So let's just. I'm fine.
Yeah, I've had a lot of my stuff fall off.
I don't think she's gonna secretly run around painting everything bright pink. So I think it's probably okay.
It is her favorite color.
Unless that was part of her sinister plan.
Okay, so do we have a nomination for Megan?
I nominate Megan.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Done. Okay, moving right along, staff updates.
Calendar item.
Okay, calendar. Calendar. Oh yeah, calendar. I always skip calendar. Okay, calendar. This is September Coastal Cleanup Day. I already mentioned that. That's this Saturday. Please go and participate. I don't get to be there this year because my niece is getting married. But it's an amazing event, and it's so much fun, and it's so rewarding, and you can really see a huge difference. And I have huge kudos to our staff, and Bob in particular, for making this site work as a cleanup site, because it not only works for the people, it works for the birds and the bay, and that's what it's really all about. So I'm so excited about that. Day in the Park, we've already talked about, will be on October 5th, which is the same weekend as Hardly Strictly Bluegrass, so just skip Hardly Strictly Bluegrass and do that on Sunday, and come to the festival on Saturday. And then in our next meeting, we're going to have the South San Francisco Scavengers Annual Waste Diversion Report. Yeah. And maybe they can bring their little sorting toy and we can all go through it.
Can we play with it?
Yeah.
I can request that. Yeah, I asked
fun.
Teresa, and she said she could come to either of the next 2 meetings. So
I think October's good.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
One of the things that we do need to talk about, though, is winter's coming up, and I would like us to have another planting day. So we should think about that when we want to do
November.
that. Mm-hmm. And Bob, would you reach out to Ariel and find out when we might do a planting day and where we might plant? And make it a real OSEC-sponsored event? Last year was kind of half and half.
Sure, I'll talk to him on Saturday.
Perfect. There, calendar's done. Anybody have anything else for calendar?
You know what? I'd really, I spent a day with my friend Lisa Greenlee cleaning up that native plant garden right next to the community park. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, there's a lot of broken sprinkler heads, and they seem to be broken anyway, because there's the low part that doesn't need water is getting water, and the high part that needs the water that dries out in the sun isn't getting any. But really, the plants are not dense enough to hold down kind of the weeds and stuff. So it's maybe a kind of a small space, but could we maybe do that for a planting day? I mean, I know it's kind of more, our focus is more for the mountain, but it's also nice to have that kind of demonstration space right next to the park.
Oh, I think that would be a good use of our time.
Yeah. I don't think it's a big enough space to accommodate the number of volunteers that we normally get.
Okay.
But I think that we could do it as a committee activity.
Sure. And can we have non-committee friends?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to cut my friend Lisa out.
Yeah, of course not. So maybe we could have two things. One is that as a committee, we have a committee event, like where we go and have a little planting time together,
and have like a picnic, like a potluck picnic for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know,
we
we work so hard. I think this is one of the hardest working committees in the city of Brisbane, and we never take time to celebrate ourselves.
So that would be fun, and then have our regular community planting day.
Yeah, that would work.
Just need a little budget for some plants.
Yeah.
Who's responsible for fixing the irrigation system in that area? Is that the city?
I'm sure that's
or
Public
volunteers?
Works.
So
Public Works.
I can see staff debating on this. What do you think?
Oops, sorry, turned my mic off. I was inquiring if it were just a committee activity that were not a public event, if we would have to publicly notice such.
I think we could, just to be safe, and be like, this is what's doing, you can come if you want.
No. Why not? But then still go ahead and schedule our regular winter planting day with Mountain Watch for our real community event, if that's okay.
That'd be fine for me.
So let's look into that.
That's
I
good
think that's a
I
good
didn't
idea.
want to take away from the mountains. So I
Right.
think you're great.
And then so let's go on with staff reports.
And then for the planting day near the community park, that might have to run by Parks and Rec and see if they have a plan or.
No, that's outside the park. It's on the other side of the street.
Yeah.
It's under our.
Which one
It's city.
So it's just
It's not at the curve.
city land.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Donnie's garden.
Donnie's Garden. We call it Donnie's Garden.
You're talking at the junction of San Francisco Street and Quarry Road, correct?
No.
No. Just at the curve. At the,
Oh, the curve.
where the
Yeah,
signboard
across
is.
from
Oh, okay, yeah, all right, got it.
We have control of that.
Yes. So, yeah, no problem.
Power.
So that
Just laugh when I
location
can't use
for a committee maintenance event, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Picnic
a
and maintenance and
separate
picnic event.
planting event.
Uh-huh.
Public.
Okay. Now staff updates.
Coastal cleanup.
Were we done with sharing committee?
Yeah, I think so.
This comes first,
Oh, wait,
Sharing
no,
committee
Megan.
matters.
before staff updates.
Didn't you have
Oh,
something?
I did have something. A couple of things. We talk about the tree ordinance, and I'm walking up Glen Park in the corner of Humboldt. There's a really large new home that was built. And like 4 or 5 trees are just gone. I mean, they're gone. I'm like, how did that even happen? I was just here 2 weeks ago because I go up that, do fast walking up that hill all the time.
Where
Gone.
exactly?
Like, you know where that little parking area is by Firth Park, right above Firth Park? Gone. Like,
Wait, just recently? Because those
Like,
are the trees that were not supposed to go.
like gone.
What the
Not
heck?
there.
So there was one that was taken out that was not on
There's
private
like
property, and that one was
4.
dealt with a few months
Seems
ago.
like there's like 4 of them. I don't know. I was like,
Some
I
of
was
those
walking
could be on
So you're
private
talking about
property.
to
right
the,
at Firth Park. You know where the parking is? You
Yeah.
parked and we go up the mountain.
Yeah.
On the left, that big new home that was just
Yeah,
built,
yeah.
yeah, I went to the
gone.
planning commission
and I was
for that.
shocked. I was like,
Ken should talk about this one because I'm not 100% sure on this. I think they had permits to remove some. They were going to have to replace them after.
oh, replace.
And I
They
think
never do that.
I think they took out more than they were supposed to.
Oh, Dawn, you mean by accident?
Yeah, I think not
Could we
sure.
have them look into that? This is not right.
I just was like, so I just said, should we be concerned? 'Cause I was, yeah. I just was shocked. It looks so, I was like,
and I think
I mean,
Ken knows.
it really made a huge visual difference.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's always this push-pull in the city, and some people are trying to get the FAR increased, which would allow more bigger building. And
Well, so it's kind of funny because we were just talking about the tree ordinance, and I'm like, whoa.
yeah,
That's
so, and if the FAR's in, I gotta go figure this out, but I mean, I would think if one's increasing the FAR, then there's going to be less room for trees.
Floor area ratio.
Yeah.
Floor area ratio.
Don't know what that is.
It's a planning.
I mean, I think we talked about it, or somebody else did. I knew there was one tree that had.
Yeah,
hope,
there
but I
was one
didn't think
tree and the-
4, or however, I don't know how many. I can't tell you. I just was shocked at the difference. So I wanted to just say that. And then I have one other thing. I was chatting with Beth Grossman, and I want to request that we agendize talking about she just completed her training at one of the former Vice President Al Gore's Climate Reality Leadership Conference in Minneapolis. And just really interesting. I kind of was asking, how do I present this and what do we do? So maybe I agendize that to see what we could do, because probably, like Adrian says, from the sound of it, which it is, it would be too much maybe for one of our meetings, and plus she's not sure that they're allowed to be taped, but maybe come up with some kind of an event. It's something weird. I don't know. She just has to find out.
All right.
Yeah, I would
We'll talk
be,
about it, but I guess people would be on phone, so I don't know. But don't know if it would be a committee thing anyway, because it's probably going to take too long and something else. But I want to agendize that we have a discussion about.
I make a motion that we further explore it under an agenda item at a future meeting.
Thank you.
You don't need to make a motion for that, but I agree. So could we
Second.
put that
Well,
on?
it's always good to make it official.
Okay.
Agendize it.
Yes,
And that was
Glenn.
it for me. Thank you very much for chairing committee matters.
Glenn?
Just one announcement, since this seems to be sort of the miscellaneous
Yeah.
section. You probably know that Climate Strike is on for this Friday.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this and you have kids in school, maybe consider letting them go, and better yet, going with them downtown. Starts at Civic Center at 10 o'clock, the Federal Building, which is 79th Street at 10.
10 a.m.
Yeah.
in San Francisco. It's Saturday morning.
Yeah, Saturday. And this is the first
I'll
of
be
a
in the
series,
city.
so if you
Say
don't...
Saturday morning or Friday morning?
Friday.
Friday morning.
Sorry.
Okay.
Friday,
And it's
September
Saturday.
20th.
Friday the 20th. And this is going to be the first of many.
Yeah, there's a whole week of action. So I'm blanking on the URL that I was just looking at a couple of days ago that has events listed all over the Bay Area. I know there's later events in Palo Alto and San Jose also on Friday, and then a series of events all throughout the week from September 20th to 27th.
That's to coincide with the United Nations meeting in New York.
Yeah, I think Monday and Tuesday were the first Drawdown conference. And I believe that was televised, so if you want to go back and catch the review, what happened during the conference, I think you can do that.
Okay. Any other chair and committee matters? Staff updates.
Go first.
A couple, sure. Some with one staff member moving on. Justin Ewan, who you met before and is responsible for transportation, is going to be our liaison to commute.org and sit on their supervisory committee. So kind of nice. You can have a bigger hand in transit type moving things forward. I just had a couple. We were working on the design of a new stairway walkway from Tulare to Santa Clara. That was funded by council, so design's underway. We've been meeting with the consultants and trying to move that along. And I've mentioned before that we applied for a grant for a stairway between Alvarado and San Benito above the alleys, and we hosted some of the members of the BPAC that wanted to came on a tour, and we showed them the location and talked about the project, and staff will do a presentation next week, and then they'll select what projects they recommend.
What's BPAC?
Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. It's
Thank you.
the CAG committee, so it's some council members and some at-large public members.
Okay.
And one more. I think that's it. Oh, the LEDs on decorative streetlights. We had the contractor that put in LED lights here, put another couple samples in, and they are on Mission Blue at the intersection with Checker Spot and with Red Hawk. And they're the best yet. The temperature was good, and
Those are the
had a
4K
good
ones?
spread of light.
3,500 or 4K, something like that.
I think they're lower.
I remember the 2,700 that went in the first batch. You thought were too dim,
Spread enough light.
and then the 5K were too white.
Yeah, they might have been 3. I don't know. They're pretty soft, but they spread the light really well, and they bypass the ballast. And we're planning to go ahead and just order a stock, and then whenever they burn out, replace with
Okay,
those.
so you said right by Mission Blue.
On Mission Blue Drive at the intersection with Checker Spot and at the intersection with Red Hawk. So
Red
there are
Hawk.
2,
I'll drive by on the way home.
and you'll be able to tell they're different than the rest. And actually,
Mission Blue and Checker Spot, did you say?
And Red Hawk.
And Red Hawk.
one at Mission Blue and Checker Spot, one at Mission Blue.
We're gonna caravan over on the way after the meeting.
And I
Can
actually,
you give me? Would it be okay for you to drive me up and then come back down and drop me home, Ross?
Yeah, absolutely.
I really
I turned off my
appreciate
car
that.
lights to get a good look at them. So
Yeah.
some-
I drove everybody else up one night, so.
Oh yeah, not a problem.
In the rain.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, there was already a bulb that you guys replaced at that intersection before because I still have it in my map.
yeah, but there might have been,
Yeah, there was probably
Across the street.
one of the early ones.
you'll be able to tell.
Mhm.
I think it was pissing rain last time I went out there to look at it, so this will be better.
Thought it would be interesting maybe to see how good it looked in adverse circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah, the ones. Oh.
I have a couple
Yeah,
questions at the end.
Oh, and we're going to put in a couple, we've had requests from people that use the Samtrans stop at Old County and Bayshore to make it more visible and easy to traverse. And we've got some older people that aren't that stable. So we're going to put in a couple of lights at the Christmas tree lot that'll light the area, and then ultimately it kind of ponds water, so we're going to repave it, but that'll take a little bit longer, and maybe mark a path kind of like what we have on San Mateo Lane. That's like, this is the pedestrian path, so that then when cars, their light will reflect. And
Probably a good idea.
Oh, very nice. That's
Yeah.
a good idea.
Can we get Sam's Trans to put another shelter at the place on,
yeah, they won't do that until we flatten, so all the roots have grown underneath it. So
okay,
we'd have to remove a couple trees.
roots, not remove the trees, cut the roots.
We'd have to remove a couple.
You'd
They're
kill the tree,
eucalyptus,
probably.
and
Oh.
they're completely under.
No,
Well,
no, they're not
eucalyptus, we should
eucalyptus in
get
the
rid of it.
park. Are they?
This is at Old Bayshore.
No, I was
Right.
talking about a different place. I was talking
Yeah.
about the one that's the stop
Okay,
that's on
so
the.
unrelated to what I'm talking about.
Sorry, yes.
Okay.
I apologize. I thought you'd finished that, and I had a different question.
Because that one also is, it's there, the shelter, but the top's cracked and
Yeah, it needs
Got it.
help.
not in ideal shape, so I thought you were talking about that one.
Yeah, no, I was talking about the one that used to be at the community park that got whacked and knocked down.
I don't know what happened to that. I will take a note about that.
Yeah, it got whacked. It was removed. Samtrans has not replaced it, and now that's where all the high school students pick up all the buses. So
Oh.
it went away just in time to be highly used. Because it used to be nothing stopped there practically.
Right.
And this was next to the park, you said?
Mm-hmm.
The one
Actually,
right in front of the post office?
Right
That
by
one?
the
no,
Across the
across
street
the
from
street
the
from the
post
post
office.
office,
Right
right
near
next to the
That's by the
maple tree.
Christmas tree.
Oh, I didn't even realize there was a
Christmas
shelter there. I
tree.
never paid
Yeah,
attention.
there used to be
Yeah.
Well, somebody whacked it.
Oops.
until somebody whacked
Okay.
it.
Any other staff updates?
I think it was a matter
Okay,
of
let's
Start.
I think it was a matter of them not. It was our stop and not theirs, so they weren't going to.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
It looked like an official Samtrans stop, but
We'll put up a yard umbrella.
Okay, Adrian.
Okay, so we received notification that we are going to be receiving the Platinum Beacon Award, the full award. We got the last 2 categories that we did not already have Platinum in. So there will be an award ceremony at the League of Cities Conference in October. They generally do press after that, so we'll probably put some press releases and such out at that
who all
point in
gets to
time.
attend that?
I believe it's primarily council members. I know some staff has gone in the past, Clay and and other department head kind of folks, but I'm not sure exactly who is going this year. I believe we have 2 or 3 council members perhaps going.
Okay.
Not sure about staff. We were just looking into the solar system here on City Hall, and it's actually outperforming expectations.
They usually do.
It looks like we may be covering pretty much our entire building
Awesome.
load here. So, of course, we've only got about 6 months of data, so take that with a grain of salt, but things are looking really good. We are moving on with the green team following the CAP staff training, so we actually have our kickoff meeting is scheduled for Monday. So we have, I think, last I checked, at least a dozen staff members who accepted the invitation to come. So I'm pretty happy with that response so far. And we'll talk through with them some projects that we can do as a team in city facilities primarily to kind of get that going. Let's see, a week and a half or so ago, Keegan Black and I went to Motive Power Systems. I know Glenn and perhaps other CAP subcommittee members are familiar. Motive is a company that does medium-duty electric vehicles built on Ford chassis, and they now have a work vehicle, a work truck vehicle. So we went down there. They did a presentation, lunch, demo. I got to drive a electric box truck around a block in Foster City a couple of times.
You should drag us to some of these things.
So this was, invited Keegan as our fleet manager to come along. Seems like there is strong potential, and being that they're only in Foster City, they offered to come up this way with a vehicle to, for further demo and kind of talking through whether it will actually work, and they will do full life cycle cost analysis and that kind of stuff. So we will be looking into that, but it seems potentially promising.
Good.
Great.
And then similar to Karen's point about Justin taking over some of the commute.org duties, that staff departure means that I am going to be taking over more of our waste management, so our franchise agreements, CalRecycle reporting, and some of that will also be things in my workload now. So we'll see how that goes and what else that means for you guys. Probably not a whole lot different, but yeah, I think that is everything that we didn't already cover.
Cool.
I had a couple questions. I wanted to know just where we are, where the city council's at with the community garden expansion.
Well, they looked at the capital projects in June, and they funded very few.
Oh, I thought the community garden was one of the ones they did fund. Am I mistaken?
I think they did.
Oh, they didn't. Okay.
I don't know. They didn't fund very much. It was on the list, but
I somehow got that mixed up. I got it on the list of things that was funded.
I can double check, but I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not this year. Unfortunately, there it seems like there's a really big need, and that would have been a pretty easy.
Stuart had said to me that if we had a funding source designated, it would be a lot easier. That's kind of stating the obvious, huh?
Yeah, maybe that's something we could do a subcommittee and look at how other ways it could be funded if the city's not willing to.
He had suggested the 280 South Hill funds, and I said I didn't think that was something that.
Yeah.
to do.
That's going to be squandered so fast.
Yeah.
Really, which is a pity.
Well,
I think part of the challenge with the community garden is the space.
Oh, yeah.
So they can't really expand too much more where they are.
It's too expensive.
Until they...
Right.
Huh? Well, no, they just haven't designated a space.
Where could they expand to?
Well,
they were supposed to expand up the hill.
Up the hill and then do some...
Terracing.
Oh, because the terracing was needed. Okay.
I think that they've put fruit trees there and stuff.
They have. When we originally started this process, I'm sorry to derail everybody, so when the original community garden came into being, there was a whole list of city-owned properties that was considered. I asked for that list. I guess it kind of disappeared. It doesn't exist anymore, maybe. But maybe if it's not financially feasible, then maybe we need to go back to square one and start looking at other locations.
So, Karen, maybe we can put this on the agenda for the next meeting, and we can have a report out on where it stands right now and any action that our committee could take to further that cause, instead of just discussing it in vague terms tonight.
Yeah, sounds
I really
great.
need to get going. It's 8:45, and we're pretty much done.
Okay. And the other thing I wanted to ask for is, I think we still haven't seen the actual energy benchmarking ordinance.
Correct.
When can we see that? Because I mean, it's great that we've talked about this high-level stuff, but at some point I'd like to read it, preferably before it's passed. Maybe.
Yeah.
Do you guys have it yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we see it?
There were other levels of review that were required.
Okay.
So I will be sending it out as soon as I can.
Okay.
And it will obviously happen before it goes to council.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes need a little lead time to accomplish things because, like everybody else, I'm busy.
And there have been a couple of changes since we thought the first draft was ready. So.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Any other things, or can we adjourn? And when is the date of our next meeting?
16th.
October 16th.
Which, you guys, my daughter's coming in from New Zealand. I haven't seen her for 2.5 years. She gets in at noon that day. So unless
Oh, she can come to the meeting.
unless she's got other plans, which she could, because I'm going to be spending some time with her in Virginia for the wedding of my niece. I wouldn't really plan on seeing me.
Okay. Okay.
But you never know.
And then we also have an ad hoc meeting Wednesday at 5 o'clock in the park. Okay. So that's a move to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Thank you.
Michelle, will you give me a ride home?
Yep.
I'm done. I'm ready to walk out the door
Yeah.
right now. I'm done. Let's go.
Ross, can you wait for me for one